On 1+1, an about-face for international climate change skeptic Bjorn Lomborg. Is your mobile your best friend? And how to bring up happy boys. Hello, I'm Jane Hutchin. Welcome to the programme. Danish-born Bjorn Lomborg's career has been marked by controversy and criticism. In his first book, The Skeptical Environmentalist, he argued that scientific claims on a range of environmental issues couldn't be supported by the data. He was accused of being a climate change denier. When his third book was released recently, critics claimed he'd changed his tune. But in this interview with Craig McMurtry, Bjorn Lomborg insists he's always believed in man-made climate change and that his views have simply been misunderstood.
Bjorn Lomborg, thanks for joining 1+1. What's it like being called the most debunked climate change writer? Do you enjoy the notoriety that you seem to have garnered over the last few years?
No, definitely not. I would love if people would just actually listen to what I say instead of, as I find very often, people simply making a straw man of the arguments. But I think in some way it reflects the problem of how we even discuss global warming. There's this tendency of an incredible bipolarity. Either you think it's the greatest challenge ever to face humankind and we're going to all die if we don't do something about it, or it's the greatest hoax ever perpetrated. And there seems to be very little position in between. And that's where I'm trying to say, what we actually need to realize, neither of these extreme positions are true. Global warming is real, but it's not the end of the world. So let's find a smart, middle-of-the-road solution, if you will, and that actually makes everyone annoyed with me.
Well, for the purposes of this conversation, let's just get on the record straight away. What is your position on climate change and whether it's man-made?
Global warming is real, it's man-made, and it is an important problem we need to fix. But the other part of the message that I make is the current approach that we've been trying for the last 18 years is not working. And so we need to recognize that while it's a problem we need to fix, we're just not doing a very good job right now. So let's find a smarter way forward.
Okay, so then we come to your book, Cool It, where, as I read it anyway, you seem to be saying pretty much the point you were making before, that we need to take the temperature down, no pun intended, on the debate. Was that the central thrust of that book?
There were 2 points. One is, yes, let's get the temperature down, because fundamentally, if we're scared, we make panic decisions, and those are not very good ones. But also, we need to find that there are much smarter ways to tackle global warming, and that was the second thrust, and the one that we've carried through in the new book, Smart Solutions.
Isn't that really a soft sell way of saying that climate change doesn't matter? A title like Cool It, that kind of an argument?
No, I don't think so. I think fundamentally it's about recognizing that we have to find a middle position, a pragmatic middle from the end of the world and not happening at all. Because if we don't cool it, let's look at what's happened over the last 5 years. Al Gore was incredibly successful in getting everybody up in arms about global warming. And I think we should give him credit for making a lot of people realize global warming is real.
You've also said he was an alarmist, I think.
But at the same time, he did so by scaring the pants off of people. Now, that's an incredibly good short-term way to get people up in arms. But if global warming, and it is a 90-year problem, it has to go on for the rest of the century. We have to find solutions for the rest of the century. You can't scare people for 90 years. You scare them for 5, and then we get tired. And that's what's happening now. We're seeing people pulling back because, hey, we just saw him show how Florida was going to get all inundated. It hasn't happened. So maybe it wasn't true at all. And that's what we're seeing in the polls, that people are pulling back and not even believing in global warming. So I think we need to realize this is about cooling down and getting to a rational place, talking about what is the problem of global warming.
How much of people withdrawing, though, if that's right, is about the fact that the debate has become so confused, so detailed, and so rancorous?
Well, I think that's probably also part of it. But I think fundamentally it's really a question of saying, if you get people all excited about this and they all think, oh my God, it's the biggest problem in the world, and we're going to see all these scares, and then for the next 5 years we've seen virtually no hurricanes hit the U.S., then clearly people start saying, well, what happened to all those hurricanes Al Gore promised us? And then you say maybe it's all a hoax. Now, both of those arguments are wrong.
Katrina, though, in hurricane.
Katrina put global warming on the American map, absolutely. And I think wrongly so, because the real problem, of course, of Katrina was that we'd built levees too low and that we hadn't evacuated the city. But the fundamental point was, just as it was misused to put global warming on the map, it's also now being misused to say, see, there's been no major hurricanes. Maybe it was all a hokum, what Al Gore was telling us. And so getting off this incredibly inflated vocabulary, this, as some people call it, the climate porn, will actually make it possible for us to have a more rational conversation about, so what should we do, instead of always vacillating between, it's the end of the world, oh, don't worry about it at all.
Which brings us, I think, quite neatly to your book, Smart Solutions to Climate Change. Why did you write the book?
Well, we asked some of the world's top climate economists to say, what are all the different solutions to climate change? Because fundamentally, we only really talk about one solution, namely cut carbon emissions, either through cap and trade or a carbon tax. Now, there are good arguments for that, but it's certainly not the only way we could do it. We could also cut methane or cut black soot. We could also start planting a lot more trees. We could make better investment in research and development into green energy. We could look at geoengineering. There are lots of different positions. What I wanted us to start talking about is, are there other ways that are going to be cheaper and more effective to tackling global warming? So we looked at all these different areas. We asked the researchers to come up with what are the best solutions. And then we had some of the world's top economists, including 3 Nobel laureates, rank all these positions. And basically what they came out and told us was, instead of the current set of solutions, the Kyoto-style approach, which for every dollar invested only does a couple of cents worth of climate good, there are much better solutions where you can, for instance, by investing in clean energy research and development, do $11 of climate good, or about 500 times more good.
We'll come back to the formula you lay out, but I just want to deal with the book for a second, because as you would know much, much better than me, your critics really climbed into you about Smart Solutions. I read some headlines describing you as a Danish chameleon, that you'd done a U-turn. One said it was Confucianist spin. And you look at the quotes, and I know it's always dangerous to pull out selectively, but there are a few quotes there. In Cool It, you wrote, "We have looked extensively at what we can do about global warming. It turns out that we can do fairly little at fairly high costs," which is the point I guess you were just making. You've also written in Cool It, "It's obvious that there are many other and more pressing issues. However, in Smart Solutions, you've written, if we care about the environment and about leaving this planet and its inhabitants with the best possible future, we actually have only one option. We all need to start seriously focusing right now on the most effective ways to fix global warming." Doesn't that represent a change of heart, a different way of looking at this issue?
There's been a lot of people accusing me of that. Honestly, no, I haven't changed my mind, but I do see that in a situation where if you say, Al Gore's solution is not working, everybody thinks, oh, he must be a denier. And then when you say we should be spending money on climate change, but smartly, they say, oh, he sounds like Al Gore, and then I'm back in the other camp. It's because we can't have a rational and serious debate where you can have a pragmatic middle.
You're talking about $100 billion on research and development clean technology, $1 billion on climate engineering, $50 billion on adaptation, protective devices like sea defences and whatnot, 99 billion or whatever's left of 250 billion in total, clean water, healthcare, education, etc. And you talk about funding it with a $7 per tonne carbon tax. So cap and trade, definitely not legitimate, not viable in your view?
Well, you have to be careful. There are many different parts of the puzzle. We're saying you should put some sort of tax on carbon, because emitting it actually does do damage to the world, and you should put a tax that's about equivalent. Now, some countries you can't talk about a tax, and maybe you should do a cap and trade, because in principle it's the same thing. Unfortunately, in reality, cap and trade often get traded off. You end up giving a lot of it to big polluters, so it often is a less effective way of dealing with it. But what we have to recognize is that the $7 carbon tax by itself is not what's going to solve global warming. At best, it can raise the revenue to fund the research and development into the green energy that will.
The problem with research and development, though, of course, is time. Do we have the time? Even if we invest the money, is there the time? Because, of course, the IPCC is warning us that there is no time, that the world needs to act.
Listen, I would love if we could just flick our fingers and solve the problem right now. But it seems to me that the current approach has shown us we've wasted 18 years. And I don't think it's a good idea to say, let's waste another 18 years on an approach that's just not working.
So is there no value in the big enterprise politically, where right now, in fact, people are in China, They are setting up now for the next big discussion in Cancun to try and get some sort of global agreement, some sort of better than political document, some binding political document. In your view, no value in that?
It's a very, very cost-ineffective way to try to deal with global warming. But also look at it politically. We've been trying the same approach since 1992, the first Rio Earth Summit in 1992. We promised to cut carbon emissions and done no such thing. At some point, it seems to me, we've got to start asking ourselves, this is not working. And there's something slightly bizarre about the way that people met up in Copenhagen last year, and it failed for the 18th time, and failed pretty spectacularly, yet most people say, okay, then we got to go to Cancun next year and try the same solution. And if it doesn't work in Cancun, we'll meet in South Africa the year after and try and see if we can do it there.
You've become such a polarizing figure on this issue. Do you have any regrets? What have you learned over the years as you have pursued these books and your agenda?
Well, actually, I don't think I've become a polarizing figure. I'm only a polarizing figure for people who haven't heard me, because there's a lot of people who say, oh, that Danish guy, he says a lot of, can you say crap in this show?
On this
but the point is, if you actually meet me, if you hear my message, a lot of people come up after I've given talks and say, I thought I'd hate you. That actually makes a lot of sense. And so we're coming out with a new film, and I actually think that's one of the ways that a lot more people are going to hear this message. And as I understand, a lot more people are going to start saying, yeah, we need to be able to say both. Global warming is real. It's not the end of the world. Let's find smart solutions. And that, I think, will really mean that we'll end up doing much, much better in tackling global warming.
Bjorn Lomborg, thank you very much for talking to 1+1.
Thanks.
How do Australians use their mobile phones, and why does it matter? Well, the biggest users are in the 18 to 30 age group, and studying their usage has broken down many of the myths about how young adults think and behave. Kate Crawford is one of the academics involved in a current study about young adults and mobiles. She's the Associate Professor in Journalism and Media Research at the University of New South Wales. Kate Crawford, thanks very much for talking with 1+1. You've been involved in a 3-year study into mobile phones and social media use amongst Australians aged, I think, 18 to 30.
That's right.
Why particularly that group?
Look, we were really interested to study this particular group. First of all, because they're so overrepresented in the way that mobile phones are marketed and described and sold to us, but also because they're so commonly pathologized as people who are addicted to their phones, overusing their phones, or forgetting the meaning of real face-to-face interaction or privacy. So there was so many discourses floating around this particular group and so many myths that we wanted to look into and to get some real data on.